This brisket video is going to cover everything you need to know to smoke a brisket. We're going to trim it, season it. I'll talk to you about the wood and charcoal that I like to use, plus the grill temperatures, plus the temperature for the internal meat, and all my juiciness tricks, plus the most important part, which is the post-cook, that resting period that you need to do before you slice it. Today we are smoking a 16-pound brisket. When you're choosing a brisket, there's two things that you want to keep in mind: the grade of the brisket and the size of the brisket. When it comes to grade, there's USDA Choice and USDA Prime. Those are the two that you're predominantly going to see in your grocery stores. The Choice is going to cost a little bit less, have a little bit less marbling. The Prime will be a little bit more expensive and it'll have more marbling. Marbling does equal flavor. You can also get an American Wagyu beef. That's going to be a little bit higher marbling and even more flavor, but the cost will be a little bit more expensive. When it comes to size, think about how many people you're going to feed and how big of a brisket your grill can actually hold, plus how much time do you have to cook the brisket. The smaller the brisket, the shorter the cook time. You want to plan for about 1 pound of uncooked beef brisket for every person that you're serving. Also, when it comes to size, today we're cooking on a 22-inch Weber Smoky Mountain, also called a WSM, so I went with a 16-pound brisket. Anything larger than this and it probably wouldn't have fit. Let's get trimming. When trimming a brisket, there are 3 things I like to have on hand: a butcher's knife, a fillet or boning knife, and a pair of scissors. I'm going to start by cutting off the 2 edges here. You just want to get all the way down the side and get kind of that rough piece of meat, or that roughage that's been exposed a little bit. I also like to look at the direction of the grain. What that means is that the muscle fibers, you can see that they are running this way. Once it smokes, it's a little bit harder to see where those muscle fibers go. So just to let me know where I want to do my slices, I cut a little notch in the end. I'm saving all these trimmings. They'll be used later and ground up for hamburgers and sausages. We've got another chunk going on over here that we can get rid of. Again, this is just the edge that was kind of exposed. And then all of this fat right here, I'm going to cut this out as well because this is not going to break down with the heat. Brisket is made up of 2 muscles. This muscle right on top, this is called the flat. This muscle right here on the bottom, this is called the point. This is going to be much more flavorful. It's going to have more marbling in it. This is called the moist, or sometimes the fatty part of the brisket. This is going to be more lean, so we're going to need to do a little extra treatment to this. But before we get there, I'm now going to come to this side of the meat. I'm just going to work to get some of this excess fat out of here. Now, there's all this fat on here. It is super thick. I want to trim this down to about 1/4 of an inch thickness, because if it's this thick, you're just going to end up with a big mouthful of fat, and you're not going to get any of your seasoning down there to the meat. Some of it's already going to be thin, like over here on my point. It's already about 1/4 inch thick. But there is a big portion right here that needs some trim down. All right, there we go. Our brisket's ready. Before I season it, I like to inject it. I am using some beef consomme, just straight out of a can, pulling it up into my injection needle. And then right now I'm gonna work with the grain, injecting every inch or so. I'm gonna concentrate most of the injection in the flat meat. It's okay, some of it will come out, that's fine. The reason I'm placing my hand over it is because sometimes it will squirt out the other side. As you inject the needle, you'll slowly pull it backwards. This way you're getting injection all through here. After I go that direction, I like to go against the grain with just a little bit more. This beef consomme is not only adding the beef flavor from the stock itself, it's also adding moisture, and because there is some sodium in this, that's also going to help with the moisture. This was a full can of beef consomme. I used about 3/4 of it for the 16-pound brisket. So if you have a full can, you can usually do about a 22-pound brisket. Smaller brisket, you'll have a little left over. Just using a paper towel to pat it dry just a little bit. But this broth is also going to act as a binder, which is going to help our seasoning adhere a little bit more. I am using a 50% blend of kosher salt and 16 mesh ground black pepper. You can also use your favorite beef rub. I have a brisket rub that I always use on brisket. This is Texas style though. You want to hold your shaker can a little bit high and just do a nice thick even coat. When you hold your shaker can up high, you get a little bit of overflow. You're going to need about a half a cup of rub for a 12-pound brisket. So I'm doing a little bit more than a half a cup here. Pour your charcoal right into your charcoal chimney. Crumble up a paper lunch bag and stick that right under the chimney, or a newspaper works fine too. Light that with a lighter and let that burn. After about 15 minutes or so, the white smoke will start to disappear and the coals will start to ash over. This is when you can dump them right inside of your WSM. Now dump some more charcoal briquettes right on top of that. Add the middle part of the WSM, followed by that water pan. Make sure the water you pour in here is hot. If you add cold water, it's going to take even longer for your grill to heat up. Then add your grill grate, place the lid on top, and now it's time to adjust the vents. The WSM has 3 vents on the bottom and 1 exhaust on the top. We're going to be cooking at anywhere between 225 to 275 for this brisket cook. So I like to barely open the bottom vents, and then I maneuver the top exhaust vent as I need to get the proper temperature. Just before adding the brisket, I like to add some wood chunks. I like using hickory or post oak. I really like the flavor I get from those. I also add a chunk of pecan. It has a nice nutty, mild flavor. And then lastly, I add a chunk or 2 of cherry. I really like the mahogany I get out of the cherry, plus I like the little bit of sweetness that smoke delivers. Once your grill is ready and your brisket is ready, go ahead and put it on the grill. I'm putting it on fat side down because that fat layer will actually protect the meat and again, help with that moisture so it doesn't cook too quickly. Every hour or 2, I like to spritz my brisket. Again, this is another key to adding moisture. I use an apple cider vinegar spray, but you can use anything from water to beer to soda. Again, whatever your flavor preferences are. This brisket has been smoking on the WSM for about 6.5 hours. I love the color of the bark. The internal temp is about 160. Now we're gonna hit it with some more of that apple cider vinegar. It's gonna add moisture, and it also just helps cut the fat and really adds a nice balance of acidity. Now we're gonna wrap it up like a present. Pull this over. Hold it up as tightly as you can. Flip. Again, tucking in those sides as much as you can. Hold this piece over here. We want to keep that fat side down. That's again going to protect the meat. We're going to put it back on the smoker. This brisket was on the smoker for another 6 hours. I probed it regularly to check the temperature in multiple places. You should be able to pierce right through the butcher paper to check the temp. More than temp, I'm looking to make sure that it feels tender, that the brisket is nice and buttery. But if you are looking for temp, you want to shoot for anywhere around 200 to 205, depending on your elevation. Now that the brisket has come off the smoker and it's nice and ready, it's not quite ready. I'm going to actually wrap it up in some aluminum foil, and we need to hot hold this. Just make it nice and tight. And then wrap it in a towel. This is going to keep it warm. And then place it into a cooler that does not have any ice in it. You want to leave it in here for several hours if you have the time. I like to do at least 1 hour to let those juices redistribute, but I have done it up to 6 hours. The main thing is make sure the temperature doesn't fall below 140 degrees because that would put it in an unsafe zone. It's time to take the brisket out. This is the moment we've all been waiting for. The reveal. Let's get it out of this foil first. It's time to tear into this. We have retained all of this great bark because we use the butcher paper, but you can see we also retained a lot of juiciness. All right, guys, it's the moment you've all been waiting for. The brisket is done. It's time to slice into this. This is what we're looking for. Super bendy, pulls right apart. And most of all, delicious. That's it. Now all you guys and gals out there are ready to smoke a brisket in your backyard. You can find all the equipment and the recipes at girlscangrill.com. Thanks so much for watching. Now get on out there and get smoking.